Some research studies and other clinical literature suggest that intense work conducted within a very short period of time in a different environmental setting presents an opportunity for the family to engage in a deeper, more meaningful, transformative healing process. So it's kind of like getting an inoculation, and each family member chooses to absorb him or herself in intense work for the purpose of healing old scars. So the families who come to our beautiful retreat here actually stay for a total of 5 nights, and it's 4 intensive days that they are working in doing this healing work at our retreat. The other interesting thing is that studies have also consistently shown that traditional therapy does not work for the purpose of healing old scars. In other words, it does not work in dealing with severe alienation cases. And in pilot studies, our particular reunification program has shown a 95% success rate in reestablishing a relationship between the child and the alienated parent and fostering that relationship so that it is maintained.
Now, this really kind of opens up a can of worms with me in a little bit. There's a number of questions that I really want to ask. On one hand, we find that in the family courts, sometimes it is the guardian ad litem or the social workers or psychologists that seem to recommend these separations, and yet the long-term effects of these can also be devastating as well. Sometimes the falsely accused, I have to say, out there there's a financial interest in doing or creating the parental alienation. That's just one question. The other question is, in your retreat, which is a totally different question, do you have one-on-one, or what if you have multiple children, 3 or 4 or 5? Do you all come as a group? I don't know how to work that kind of a question. It's a little overwhelming, but I don't know where you want to start. But maybe does there have to be a change in attitude in, at least in America, in the social service industry, and I'm going to call it an industry, in changing their way of thinking that, wait a minute, let's keep the families together the best they can, both parents involved, instead of leaning one way or the other. How do we change that? Is there a movement to do that?
Well, the thing is like I said, we have found, and not only my own specialized team, but as well many researchers, even though there are very few and far of us, we're few and far between worldwide, but those of us who work and conduct research studies on parental alienation, as I mentioned, we all recognize, and the research consistently shows, that you cannot do traditional therapeutic approaches with these children. And sadly but true, many judges, many mental health professionals, many attorneys are not aware of that. And so they will automatically promote traditional therapeutic approaches to occur. And as a result, they fail. And there's many reasons why they fail. One reason being is that the favored parent will not want the child, obviously, to reconnect with the targeted parent. And as a result, the favored parent will sabotage everything that has to do with the counseling process. That can be no-shows, that can be firing the mental health professional right away. It can be breaching court orders for counseling, all sorts of different factors like that. And so even though there are some mental health professionals and legal professionals who believe that a program like ours is not a good idea because it is perhaps taking the child away from the favored parent, what we have to recognize is that favored parent is a very unhealthy person. And that person is causing the harm to this child that will indeed end up becoming the statistics that I just talked about in terms of the long-term consequences.
It's funny you mentioned that. We had actually Dr. Sue Kornbluth on, and basically she started off with that concept that generally the alienating parent typically is a sociopath in that they're trying to separate that child. They're trying to divorce that child from the other parent, causing greater harm. And
you're absolutely right.
She totally agrees with you with that. And that's the first time I heard the phrase that parental alienation is indeed child abuse. However, when I sat on the redress committee in the House, we documented one case, and that's some of the verbiage that we used was the fact that one of the judges was enabling child abuse because they were separating a good, healthy, non-violent parent, not adjudicated as an unfit parent in any way, separating them from their child and causing harm to the person, to the child. And we were kind of astounded by that, and yet the House hasn't done anything about it. But that's another discussion. So as far as your retreat, you said it's about 5 days?
It's a 4-day program, a 5-night overstay. Mm-hmm. It's strictly, we have 6 different components to the program. So initially what happens is the child and his or her siblings, so going back to your second question, mm-hmm. if there's a family of 6 children or an only child or 12 kids, they all come to our retreat. And they initially attended without having any contact with either parent. Then what happens is the child or his or her siblings begins a psychoeducational program that leads to the reunification process with the rejected parent. Now, on the day that the child and or his or her siblings come to our program, the parent will either arrive separately that same day or the rejected parent will arrive the following day. Then that particular parent will begin working with one of our psychologists in preparation for a successful reunification. The child and the rejected parent will engage in various psychoeducational and outdoor experiential programs separately, then together after they have successfully reconciled with each other. And prior to departing the program, the child and parent share the same large living quarters at our retreat, plus they enjoy a special celebration that's chosen by the child. In the meantime, the favored parent seeks counseling with one of our trained and certified family reflections therapists in his or her own locale, whether that be in the United States or Canada. Or if for any reason that's not possible, for example, maybe the favored parent lives in a really rural area, then the favored parent seeks counseling with one of our specialized therapists who have, again, been trained and certified with us. And that's done through either phone or a safe, secure video conferencing service. And then last but not least, the 6th component that has made our program very successful is the fact that we believe in a very, very strong continuing care plan to support the reunification process. So it's an important key to obtaining long-term success. So prior to the family even coming to our retreat and the favored parent actually starting the counseling process with one of our specialists, we will pre-select and make sure that we have everybody ready to pick up where we leave off here at the retreat. So as our on-site program draws to a close, our clients work with their therapists here to develop appropriate future plans of action. And this, of course, ensures the elements of a really good recovery plan and making sure everything's put in place and it's tickety-boo before the family leaves our retreat. And the plan may include individual and or family therapy by one of our trained and certified therapists located near the family's home and or continued involvement via phone or internet with the on-site therapist here at our center.
When people come to me and they say, you know, we need somebody to talk about my story. We need to talk about how the family courts have abused us, or I need you to hear my case. One of the first things I ask them is, are you willing to do a background check? Are you willing to meet our standards before we even go any further? Have you documented your case? You've got to have some kind of prerequisites before people come to your, a retreat. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. It's my professional opinion, Kevin, that in order for our program to continue to be successful in reestablishing a healthy relationship between children and a rejected parent, two things must occur. And this needs to take place whether it's an American court system or a Canadian court system. One, the court must order that child custody be reversed in favor of the rejected normative parent for at least a meaningful period of time during which the children will experience only the rejected parent's caregiving. Wow. And two, the court must suspend any direct and indirect contact between the favored parent and the child for a period of time until the child's resilience to any negative messaging or to an enmeshed relationship can be rebuilt and the child's attachment to the rejected parent can be rebuilt.
So now, how do you get the court?
Our requirements in a court order in order for acceptance into our program. And the reason these two criteria are prerequisites to acceptance into our program is that it's vital to the therapeutic success for estranged children to experience the caregiving of the parent that they are rejecting, and continued contact with the favored parent will prevent successful therapeutic progress and repair of the family dynamic.
I wonder, in my experiences looking at so many cases, is if the courts would ever be even willing to do such a thing. I know that some children are being held ransom, basically, for child support and kept from parents. They get thrown into the system, and it takes maybe about 6 to 8 months for the courts to get caught up. They label one parent delinquent because of arrearages, and as a penalty, they hold the child as hostage, creating the parental alienation, all because of financial. So I wonder if the courts would ever even admit that they were part of the problem and allow the reunification at some point. It's a struggle in my mind because I can see where there's a barrier already, and things need to change locally to stop this, because basically they're creating business up the road for them in the criminal courts if they don't figure this out. So that's a high standard, though, that the courts order this. Do you have a procedure or a recommendation or an amicus brief or of some sort to encourage the courts to act this way?
Absolutely. I use an amicus brief, or the other thing that I tend to use is I will certainly help out attorneys in any way, if that means preparing an affidavit with all the information about our program, as well. The research studies that have been done on our program have been submitted to be published in peer-reviewed journals. So, there's a lot of good stuff that's coming, and a lot of good stuff that's there already. And as a result, here in Canada, we do have courts who have followed our recommendations, and it's happening.
And those are published, right? Those success stories are published somewhere, I would hope.
Our actual studies have been submitted for publication, but they haven't actually been published yet. But we've been advised that they will be published in peer-reviewed journals.
Now you also train people in your profession as well, don't you? Do you have seminars?
Yes, I do. Yes.
And where can people go to those seminars to be acquainted with your thesis and approach here?
Right. Well, in terms of my model, what I do is I have traveled throughout the United States and Canada and will continue to do so in 2014. And what I do is I provide 2-day intensive training programs for mental health professionals. The first day is on how to do effective assessments for determining whether alienation is occurring. It's very, very important because, as I'm sure you're very aware, there's a lot of times that improper assessments have been made, and as such, a child who is truly alienated is not being looked after because, for whatever reason, the mental health evaluator or therapist made improper findings. The other day is intensive training on how to do the proper therapeutic work with these children. And within my model, I use a particular method that is also used in addictions work, where we work with people depending on what stage they're at in terms of motivation and change. So children, for example, who are alienated, whether it's mild, moderate, or severe, they have absolutely no idea that they are experiencing this form of child psychological abuse. They have they feel no need to want to change because, as far as they're concerned, life is tickety-boo with their favorite parent, and they don't want to have anything to do with the other parent.
Right.
So in those kinds of cases, it's impossible to provide quote-unquote therapy to these children. Instead, the only thing you can do is the same thing you can do with an addict who is in denial, and that is you can only provide psychoeducation. So that's what we do in the beginning stages in our program. Is we use the stages of change model when working with these kids, where we introduce things like we do a magic show in the very beginning, where and it's a fantastic show. It's things like what Houdini used to do and other famous magicians. And the whole idea is we're just getting the children to see that sometimes things that we see are not really what we see, and that life is full of illusions and misperceptions and all sorts of things. So those are the kinds of things that we do in the beginning stages. And then as the child is starting to put everything together in terms of how our model works, then they on their own recognize, holy moly, I've just realized that this is what's going on in my own life with my own family.
Right.
And it's from there that we prepare them for the reunification process. Our studies have shown that it takes more than 1 day, but no less than 3 days before that child makes that connection on his or her own and is able to reunify very safely with the rejected parent.
Well, I would like your opinion on a couple of other things that we're experiencing right now. We have one case, Dr. Vandenberg. He was married to a psychologist or somebody in that field. And she successfully alienated him because she didn't want him to pray with her daughter. He hadn't seen his daughter for 3 years. And the judge got a note from the guardian ad litem in a sealed envelope, and he said, "Mr. Vandenberg, your daughter wrote me personally saying she doesn't want to be with you." He wasn't allowed to see what was in that sealed envelope. He's a doctor. Never adjudicated as an unfit parent. But he was married to somebody in the psychological field, which I find to be doubly offensive. Then we had other cases where this one did drugs and the father did drugs. How do you mediate that type of mess? How do you work with that? Do you see these cases as well?
You bet I do. Yes, that's why the assessment process is an extremely intense, comprehensive process. And that's what I teach in these 2-day programs throughout the country, including yours, is that you cannot just take this at face value. There are so many factors that one has to look at to determine whether this is a pure alienation case or whether this is a case of legitimate estrangement.
Right.
In other words, there's something going on that really warrants the child to resist or refuse to have contact with that other parent. In some cases as well, we have what are called hybrid cases, meaning we have combinations. We may have a combination of enmeshment and alienation or other factors. So it's not something that, like I said, a mental health professional can easily look at unless they've received the proper training in doing so.
So how do people get in touch with you? How can they start exploring the retreat and getting acquainted with what you're talking about?
Well, there's different ways that you can go about doing that. One website is www.familyreflectionsprogram.com. The other one is www.drkathleenreay.com. And Ray is spelled R-E-A-Y.
I know. I had
and
to.
You can also contact me at drkathleenreay@gmail.com. I'll spell that out. DRKATHLEENREAY@gmail.com.